Hey guys, so I have been burning through books lately apparently, and I wanted to do another book review for you guys because since Thursday I have read through 2.5 books. So I was sitting here complaining this whole time thinking like, I'm a slow read, this is gonna take me forever. My goal was to read one book a month, and I'm just plowing through books apparently. So tonight I'm actually probably going to take a break and work on my Book of Shadows, which as soon as I progress more in that, I will be doing a video on that as well. But I just wanted to get into it. So this book, the book I'm going to be doing a review on that I just finished is called From Here to Eternity by Caitlin Doughty. And this is it. So this book came to my attention actually by Raquel, Thebarefoottaurus. She had let me had started to talk to me about the fact that Jessica Starr, the Story Witch, did a review on this, and that it seemed like a really interesting book. And so I got curious and I watched her video and her thoughts on it, and I really enjoyed what she had to say. And what really made me want to read this and be drawn to it is the fact that it is basically about the author traveling through different parts of the world and observing death customs in different cultures. And this has actually been something that I've been very interested in for quite some time. So I was really excited to read this because I've always kind of wanted to know the differences between various cultures and how they view death. One of which I've always had a lot of respect for was Day of the Dead in Mexico. So, and I spent a little time in Japan too, so I do have a little bit of an understanding of Japanese death customs as well. And it's interesting because, as a fact, those areas are both covered in this book. But each chapter is a different part of the world, and she kind of goes through her experiences. And most of this is under the guise that here in the Western culture, specifically to the United States, we're pretty much very removed from death, and we're pretty detached from the process of it. And the author works as a, excuse you, miss, the author works as a mortician, really. And she runs her own funeral home out of LA, so she definitely has a lot of firsthand experiences of how the differences are between our culture here in the United States and other cultures around the world. But as I was going to say, the chapters go through different parts of the world and her experiences. So it's Colorado, Indonesia, Mexico, North Carolina, Spain, Japan, Bolivia, and California. So there are sections of the book that do take place in the United States, but they are basically covering different, more unconventional ways of death customs and how to care for the body, which I thought was really interesting because it just kind of shows that there are many people who are trying to incorporate more green ways to dispose of the body, because there has been a rise of cremation in our country, which is great, but cremation isn't exactly environmentally friendly. And I myself personally would like to be cremated, but you know, I do have concerns if it's not environmentally friendly. I would like to I don't want to leave this world causing a mark on the planet that I love. So that's something that, you know, eventually I'm going to have to figure out myself, probably sooner rather than later, considering you never know when your time is. But most of these cultures and most of the experiences that she has kind of talk about a stronger presence with the body for a longer period of time. Specifically in Indonesia, we're talking 8-9 years with the body, which to most Western cultures is astounding, and really we're honestly put off by it. I was put off by reading it. I was like, I can't imagine having a deceased family member living in my home. Um, and it kind of goes through some of the myths and stuff that we most commonly experience with this sort of thing too. And the other thing that I really enjoyed about the book is that her form of writing is fantastic, and she really has a knack for accounting her personal experiences, but she also slips in every now and then a little bit of humor, and it's not so it's not inappropriate in any way. It's very well fit into the context. So I did find myself chuckling throughout the book a little bit, which is interesting considering the topic of it. But it was nice because it didn't feel so heavy. It kind of made me feel more comforted when I was reading it. And part of me almost wishes that I had read this book before my mother died. Maybe I would have done things a little differently. But, you know, here we are, and things are what they are. But I think the one chapter that stood out to me the most personally was Mexico. And it was probably the subject matter. If you're a mother, you will probably have a hard time reading this chapter, just to warn you. I definitely cried. But again, I've always really had a lot of respect for Day of the Dead. And I learned something in this book that showed my complete ignorance to Santa Muerte, which I did not know that Santa Muerte is a female deity. I didn't know that, guys. I did not know that, and I felt so strange that I didn't know that. But then it got me thinking, from a pagan perspective, there are an astounding amount of deities that have to do with death that are female. And that is kind of interesting to me. I mean, in Norse mythology, it's Hel and Freya, and Odin deals with the dead some, but Freya gets her first pick of it, and Hel is who kind of oversees the underworld. And then, you know, in Greek we have Hades, who again is much like Hel, but then there's also Persephone. And in Japan and Japanese culture, it is Izanami, who is also female. And then Santa Muerte in Mexico, who apparently is female, which I did not know, and that's really cool. And I know there are various other examples throughout different cultures of death being female. In Marvel Comics, death is female, which is completely different from mythology, but I'm just saying it's an interesting thing that the Reaper is most commonly seen as female. So I just found that oddly empowering. I don't know, just something about it was interesting to me. And there's something in the end of the book, I know Jessica Starr, the story, which discusses this too, but this also really resonated with me quite a bit, just because I recently went through this, I recently experienced this, and I will tell you right now that I wish this was more of the case. There is a chapter, the very last chapter in the book, after California, is discussing holding space for the family and holding space for the dying, and I really wish that that was more of a thing here in our culture, because I can tell you right now, experiencing it last year, there's not enough, and there's not enough support, there's just not enough. And my other thought that I took away from this book is, I feel, and the author had expressed this as well, that how we view death in our culture makes it more difficult to grieve. It makes it more difficult to process and more difficult to accept the reality of it. And I know this is something that has befallen me following the passing of my mother. This has been difficult for me to accept, and some of that just is. But I almost wonder if things had been differently, or if things have been handled differently, or if things in our culture were different in some shape or form, that perhaps maybe I would have accepted it a little easier. I don't know. But that really, really struck a chord with me. It was really, really kind of profound to read. And I found out a lot of interesting tidbits and information that I just quite frankly didn't know. Again, you know, Santa Muerte being female. And there's a ton of other stuff that I could honestly go on about, but I don't really want to spoil the book so much for those who really want to read it. But I highly recommend this book, especially if you're interested in death lore and death customs and learning about that. It was so captivating that I mean, no wonder I plowed through it in 2 days. But again, it's From Here to Eternity by Caitlin Doughty, and it's really, really good. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this review, and I will put a link to the channels mentioned down below. I will also put a link to the book, which you can find on Amazon, and I believe the author has a website. If she does, I will definitely put it up as well, because sometimes it's better to buy directly from the author if you can. So anyway, blessed be, guys. Have a great day.